with the Sacramento Observer, joined with Flojaune Cofer, who's announced her campaign for District 1 Board of Supervisors. Hi, Flo.
Hi, how are you? It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us here today. Thank you. I appreciate your time. So, you told us that you were hesitant to get in the race because you were helping Mai Vang with her campaign for Congress. So, what changed your mind?
I mean, I was, right?
Right.
And I try to be very transparent about process because I'm a human being, and I think sometimes the way that lore gets created is when we don't tell our stories in real time. So I was honest about the fact that, in this region, we have a limited number of people, and when you're running campaigns that rely on a lot of volunteers and a lot of people power, you are splitting, resources when you do that. And when I said that out loud, people said, yeah, but don't you remember your campaign slogan that more is possible? Why can't we run multiple campaigns and why can't we help each other? And so I had somebody who, really helped me perspective shift on that and to think a lot about what is possible when we work together, what's possible when we do things differently, because if we want to govern differently, we also have to campaign differently. And so I decided, you know what, there are a lot of opportunities in this race, in this region, to be able to do something different, and it is important to get in the race to be able to explore all of those opportunities.
Is that person that motivated you going to be working on your campaign?
A lot of people who motivate me are working on the campaign, and a lot of them are volunteers. I sent out a survey to the, 5,000 people who are on my email list, and I had somewhere around 400 responses, and the overwhelming majority were yes. There were a few people who were worried about, just the timing, and a few people said, I'd love for you to run for mayor again. But what I realized as I was reflecting on this question, since the Bee wrote the first article, in late November last year saying, Cofer, come back, run for county supervisor. And I was like, whoa, the ink isn't even dry on this election. How are we, doing this already? But what I thought a lot about was the very core questions that I was asked on the campaign trail when I ran for mayor. The number one question was, what are you going to do about homelessness? And the number two question was, what are you going to do to work with the county? What are you going to do about the county? How are you going to make things better? And the truth is that many people don't know what the county does, but the county is actually responsible for health and human services. The county is responsible for some of the things that we often look to the city for. And if we strengthen those partnerships, we can address a lot of the challenges in the city. And so I really thought about the fact that this is a way to be able to take all the people who were so excited about the campaign, who want to see change in the region and who are fired up, and allow us to be able to point that spotlight, point that energy and attention to an institution that really needs more of our attention and time and our focus on it, because it will benefit the entire region, including the city of Sacramento.
So is there a specific issue or concern that you have at the county level that played a part in you deciding to run for District 1?
There are so many issues that are happening, at the county level that make me want to run. But one of the ones that stands out to me most is one of the supervisors posted earlier last year about, the impact of the big bill. And because I don't think it's beautiful, but the big bill and its impact on, all of the benefits for people in our region and how that was going to be really challenging. And my response to that was, okay, so can we finally let this $1 billion jail expansion idea die, right? Because it is the proposal that has not yet been approved, but just won't seem to go away. And it's a lot of money to be able to invest that doesn't really do what we need in this region and isn't really the top concern in the region. If you ask people, most people don't say, what Sacramento most needs is an expanded jail. What they say is we need, affordable food, and we need affordable housing, and we need to make sure that people have insurance. They talk about childcare and the cost there. They talk about jobs and wages not keeping pace with inflation. Those are the issues that people talk about. They talk about wanting to be able to access services and having a difficult time navigating bureaucracy. They talk about not knowing where to go when they need things or having long wait lists for the core essentials in their life. And so when I think about where our resources should go in a time when our federal government is in some ways actively working against us, I look to the locals and I think about the county with its really large budget and its deep responsibility. And I say, that's a place that should be shining right now. It should be a place that everybody can name, that everybody knows who's on it, and people know that they can turn to it and rely on it to meet our community's needs.
So is the jail expansion then one of your largest criticisms of the county and its decision-making in the past several years?
I think it's the most egregious, but I think that there are lots. I think the approval of the Coyote Creek project for deforestation is a real challenge. I I go back to the COVID time when Sacramento County was given $300 million to address COVID, and the Board of Supervisors paid very little attention to that money, and it mostly went to the sheriffs until we had to make a really big stink about it. Shout out to Cares for the People Coalition that said, where is the money and why does public health seem to not have what it needs? And having to, really strongly encourage Dr. Kassiri at the time to come forward and say that she had been told she could ask for $2 million of the COVID money to be able to do her work, and that was insufficient. So when I look at leadership there, and that led, of course, to the firing of the executive, for the county, and a lot of other things that came. But our grand jury for the county of Sacramento has been putting out report after report about the challenges in our region. Our journalism in the region, including the Observer, have been talking about the things that the county should be doing and is not doing. And that does not mean we don't have great people working at the county, but what it does mean is that the leadership needs to reflect those great people and needs to support and embolden and encourage those great people and make sure that they have what they need to be able to do their work well. And when we deny COVID money to public health, we are not doing the right thing. And those same problems that led to that, just because the COVID pandemic at its peak is over, does not mean the problems that led to the COVID money not going to public health are not still real and are not still present.
And school children and their scores and their aptitude tests are notably one of the things which they still
Absolutely.
are reeling from.
And we need to think about our budgets, right?
Yeah.
The county has a much larger budget. We talk a lot about the city budget. They're facing obviously $90 million deficit, but the county has a much larger budget and also has responsibility, including to the people in the incorporated cities, to make sure that those health and human services, the things that we need to be able to address homelessness, the substance use services, how we manage, emergency response and care for the region is handled appropriately.
I'll get to the budget about the county. I've heard what the common response is to the size of the budget of the county, but we'll get to that. So then if elected, what would your top 3 priorities be at the county?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think we always start to talk about top 3 priorities, but number 1, of course, would be homelessness, because it's the number 1 issue in our region. I was incredibly disappointed at the thing that I had been asking for. That's one of my campaign platforms, was to bring the city and the county together to address homelessness. So nobody was more excited than I was to hear that there was going to be a joint meeting. And yet that meeting, with no plans for future meetings, just sat down and said, gee, things are really bad here. We spent 8 hours documenting what everybody already knew and not having any plans. And we spent $75,000 to an outside contractor for a 4-line agenda that accomplished nothing. When we have staff in the county of Sacramento, in the city of Sacramento, who could have put together a more meaningful agenda. And when you put together an agenda, the first question is, what are we trying to accomplish with this convening? And establishing that this is a problem, asked and answered. We already know that as a region. So what could we have done?
We don't need any more reports about how bad homelessness is.
The question is, what are we going to do about it? And so that's a top priority for me is, yes, we need to work together, but the heavy emphasis on work. We need to be doing things that are yielding outcomes and changing what we're doing, because doing what we're already doing in the exact same way is not going to work. It either needs to be scaled up or changed.
So what is a tangible difference that the county could be doing with homelessness? It's one example that they could be, one service they could be providing. What could they be doing better?
Yeah, so a tangible thing that the county could do, first and foremost, is looking to see how are we going to get more people into housing? What are the options? Can we use existing housing stock, because we do have a lot of vacancies, and get people into housing? What can we do to be able to shorten these wait lists? What can we do to make sure that people have a place to go immediately, as many of them as possible? We need to treat this like a crisis, because it is. And so that's top of my priority, is how do we get people in? But the second thing we have to do is we have to keep people in their housing. We need to talk about how do we stabilize people where they are? Because when every $100 rent increases our homelessness by 9%.
Oh.
So there is a correlation between affordability and the people who are at risk of homelessness. And it still stands out to me that some of those COVID response dollars, especially the ones that were used by the city, actually helped stabilize people in their housing. And when you looked up a year later, the majority of the people were still in their housing with just a one-time small infusion of money, because that's how close some people are to not being able to pay their bills and not be able to stay where they live.
So aside from homelessness, what would your two other priorities be?
Definitely, we need to think about jobs and especially a Green New Deal. We need to be focusing on the ways in which we can focus on our environment because we are careening towards, real challenges when it comes to climate change and when it comes to pollution and when it comes to us having a habitable environment. And those two things go hand in hand. We have to have a conversation about transportation. We have to have a conversation about new jobs and energy resources. And all of those go together as we're thinking about our region and its economy. So that's absolutely one of the priorities. And then I think the third one is we need to be thinking about safety. People need to feel safe in their communities, and that's where all of the services that we do go together. There's a really great cartoon that talks about, why when we think about safety, it can't just be who responds after the fact, after an emergency. I know none of us wake up and want to call 911 any day. Like that means something's gone wrong. But the question is, how many of those emergencies could have been prevented? How many of them with some resources up front never had to happen in the first place? And that's where a lot of the county's investment needs to be made is in what can we do to prevent some of these things, and then how can we appropriately respond when they happen?
All right, changing gears a little bit. The challenger is sitting council member Eric Guerra, who's been with the city council a number of years.
Yes, and former state senator Deborah Ortiz.
As well as her.
Yes.
But Guerra has the endorsement of the sitting supervisor, Phil Cerna, who announced him not seeking re-election, shockingly. But what do you make of him endorsing Eric Guerra?
Well, they're very close, right? I mean, I believe, Supervisor Cerna is the godfather of one of Eric Guerra's, Councilmember Guerra's children. So they are close, and that makes a lot of sense to me. But I also think that endorsement comes with a lot of the, passing of the flame from one establishment candidate to another. It comes with a lot of more of the same, right? This is sort of a progression in a long career. And this, I think, race is not about legacies. It's not about, a stepping stone for someone in the region to be able to step into a new seat. It's about the future of our communities. It's about the fact that the outcomes we are currently experiencing are unacceptable. And so we need to be thinking about how do we change those outcomes. And so that's what this campaign is going to be focused on. It's not about running against another candidate. It's about really putting forward a vision for this is what we need. And I think the changes that we need to see in this region are changes that I've built a coalition of people who want to work together, who want to roll up their sleeves and make our successes possible. And that's what we need throughout the region. And this is an opportunity to be able to have real successes come to bear for both the county as well as the incorporated cities and the unincorporated areas within the county.
And do you think voters are ready for a change at the county, a new direction, or do you think that they are seeking continuity?
Well, the truth is, I don't know what voters across the entire county are looking for, right? But I can say that in the Sacramento mayor's race, which closely overlaps with this district, at least the majority of the district is in the majority of the city is in District 1 and District 2. And what I will say is that, 94,495 people said, I'd like Dr. Flojaune Cofer to be my mayor. And I am a change candidate. I am not a part of the establishment. And that is a sign to me that people were open to new ideas, that they wanted people who were going to think about our budgets differently, think about community engagement differently, think about being transparent about how we are as humans and what we're considering. I invite people into the table. I pick up the phone and call people as I'm making decisions. I want to hear from even the people who don't support me. I still want to hear your ideas about how we make things better, about what you're doing to serve our communities. Because I know that Sacramento is rich in people who are doing a lot of work here, and what we need to work on is doing that work in coordination in a complementary fashion, and also making sure that our government is meeting the same energy of the people who are working so hard here. And so that's what I think we're up for, and I think Sacramento is ready for that.
So, and we're getting to the budget and the bones of what the county does here, but many voters understand local government as far as the city council and mayor form of government goes. How would you explain what the county does to your average voter?
I would explain it this way. If you don't live in a city, if you live in the unincorporated areas, right? If your street signs are white with black print instead of green with white print, you live in the unincorporated county. And that means that you are relying on the county as your city, as the one that's that's picking up your trash, that's providing you with, your utilities, all your basic services. And also is covering all of the health and human services, responsible for the budget for the jail and
Even in the
for the
city.
district attorney, et cetera, the courts. And in the city takes on some of those municipal services. So maintaining some of the roads and maintaining and giving you your trash and your utilities. But you're also relying on the county for those services, for health and human services and the jail and the courts and the district attorney and all of those. So if you're in the city, you have two governments that you have to go to and figuring out who to go to for what. But if you're in the county, you're all. And so that's what we do. And that's where the budget comes in, the mental health services. A lot of people said to me as I was talking about homelessness on the mayor's race, yeah, but that's the county's responsibility. And I'm like, you're right. But it doesn't mean that we all don't have a way to be able to pitch in and a role to play. And that's where the collaboration and that's where making sure that we're all good partners comes in.
And so with your background in public health, how does that How do you plan to use that to navigate and implement that? I'll start over with that question. How does your background in public health help you with the public health systems that the county oversees?
Well, I have experience working in those systems. My background is I worked at the Department of Public Health. At the beginning of my career, I did a fellowship. That's actually what brought me to Sacramento now over 20 years ago, and what inspired me to stay. And I've done work with Sacramento County, including leading the community health improvement work as it began in this last cycle. So part of what I'm bringing to the table is I know public health. And I know the systems that are reporting. I know the social service systems. I'm actually sitting on a committee right now with the Department of Social Services, really working on how do we address some of the issues with foster care and the disproportionality, especially for Black children in foster care. What can we do to prevent that? So I'm familiar with the systems. And I think that's just a missing expertise on the 5-member board of the county supervisors. We don't have anybody currently who has a background in public health. We don't have anybody who has expertise in some of these systems. So I think that's the big value add that I have both in this race as compared to my opponents, but also what I have to contribute to the board as a 5-member board.
And so regarding the budget, a lot of people, including supervisors, will say, well, they only have so much discretionary funds. The budget is about $9 billion, but they only have roughly
40% or so. Yes.
Not even that, I've heard some of them say. Discretionary. What would you say to them only having, well, let's call it, 2.5 billion, still more than the city? What do you say when they say most of our budget's already allocated and it's non-discretionary?
Yeah, so there's a lot of funds, right? There are enterprise funds, there are all these funds that come in that comprise a municipal budget. That same thing is true at the city, right? We always talk about the city having a $1.5 or $1.6 billion budget, but only about half of that is discretionary, right? So you're always going to have the funds that are set aside to do the core work of whatever the municipality is, and then you're going to have your discretionary funds. But the other thing is you also have fewer people to be able to address with those dollars. So you have 7 incorporated cities within the county that are taking care of some of those things. So you have, whatever your 30-40% of the budget that's discretionary, but some of those people you don't have to pay for everything for. So the question becomes, what do we do with those discretionary funds when you only have 3 times the number of people in the entire county as the city of Sacramento? And you're talking about having quite a bit more money, but not having to do everything for everyone. So how do we use those funds appropriately? And that's the main question for this election and for every legislative body. It's not actually always how much money do you have, it's what have you chosen to prioritize. And I think that's the thing that constantly needs to come back to the table as a serious question, because every year we get sort of a recycled budget with most of the things that were in it from the year before. And I believe in continuity. I'm not saying we should scratch all of those things, but I think there is a question of, are we spending the right amount of money on the right things, and are we yielding the outcomes we want based on our spending? And if the answer is no, then we need to look at our budget and say, what should change?
So hopefully you've glanced at the budget recently. The county oversees, child welfare services.
Yes.
The jail, mental health, funding for the sheriff, funding for the district attorney's office. Where do you believe they might be overspending, or where do you think they might be falling short?
Well, one of the things that I've already set up is some conversations that I'm going to have with these departments, really to be able to understand what their pain points are, because I'm a learner. And so I want to learn what people are experiencing, the expertise of the people who are in those systems. But as I'm looking, I'm thinking about, are the dollars being spent as efficiently as they could? And when I think about the totality of the budget, I start to look and say, are there some places where we're spending dollars that don't really make sense? Are we approving things that shouldn't make sense? How many of our county dollars, our staff time, has been spent on this jail expansion over and over again to meet the Mays consent decree, right? How much is being spent in overtime? What are we asking our officers to go out to calls that maybe could be redirected elsewhere? We have a 988 system. I want to know, how is that working, right? What calls are going? How are people responding? Are we getting the bang for our buck? Do people know about 988, or are we still having to filter those calls through 911? Is there a way to be able to redirect some of those calls when they come into the right place? So those are the things I'm looking at. It's not about coming out and saying, hey, let's cut this, or I think this is wasteful. It's really about saying, what's the outcome we want? And how do we spend money to get to that outcome? And I think that's a question that has not been asked in a way that invites our community in to be able to say, to be able to frame the outcomes, and then to be also help to shape the solutions.
And you would be the first Black woman to ever sit on the dais.
That
There's
is
only
right.
been one other Black person. What was
Grantland Johnson.
Grantland Johnson, who's no longer with us, as you
Yes.
said. How would you address racial and economic disparities within county services if elected?
Well, you can't face what has not been named, right? And so several years ago, in a 4-1 vote, the county did pass racism as a public health crisis, right?
Cerna did spearhead that.
Yes, absolutely. And I actually worked on that proposal as a member of Public Health Advocates, along with a lot of community organizations that were saying this is the right way to go. It would have been nice if it was unanimous, but it was also a resolution, right? So it was named, but not much more beyond naming it has come into effect. I love the Black Child Legacy campaign. That's another thing that we have seen, right? We have First Five. We have some investments, but we also need to do more. We need to have an economic initiative that says, how are we spending our dollars in Sacramento County? Who are we investing in, and how do we make sure that we are building out businesses and we are making sure people have jobs, and that the prosperity of the region is also the prosperity of the Black community in the region. And so those are the things I want to look at. I want to do a racial equity analysis of our budget and say, how are we spending our dollars in all of the communities, and are we making sure that we're getting the outcomes we need? I want to be thinking about, some of our county education funding. And are we getting the outcomes that we need for students? What is going on with the low literacy rates and with not meeting the standards at grade level that are needed? And what can we do to invest those dollars differently? And what can we do to bring those community partners together? So those are the things I'm going to be thinking about when it comes to addressing race from the county, but also being able to make sure that the county is thinking clearly about all of its residents, not just the loudest ones, but all the residents that exist in the community, and inviting people in and being transparent. The county, I think one of the challenges beyond just the budget is that the meetings only happen during the workday. So the majority of people can't come. And the agendas are incredibly long, and there's not really been a concerted effort to have people coming out into the community and saying, we are the county of Sacramento, your elected members, not the staff. You will see the staff at community events all weekend doing great things out there promoting the oral health program and the mental health services and all of that. But the actual elected officials coming out and saying, we are your elected members, what's going on in the community, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting the things that are happening in the region so that it can inform their politic. This body has been too sleepy, too overlooked, and too ignored, and that needs to change.
And last question. If you were writing this story, what is it that you would want readers or viewers to know?
Well, one, I would never fashion myself to be a journalist because I have deep and profound respect. One of my other mothers, shout out to Elaine Efford, who actually started the Black journalism work in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, my hometown, who passed away actually on election night in 2024. And so I have a deep and profound appreciation for journalists and would never even dare to be the one writing this story. But if I were to be the one framing the conversation, I think what I would want people to know is that we have started a movement in Sacramento. there was a conversation I used to have with former Mayor Darrell Steinberg all the time, and it was usually a closing kind of quip that we would have every time we had to interact on something. Sometimes we were coming together because we agreed on something, but sometimes we were, on the opposite sides of things. And he would always say to me, Flo, Sacramento's not as progressive as you are. And I would always say to him, and it's not as conservative as you think it is either. And I may not have won the mayor's race, but I think one of the victories of 2024 was after the primary, when Darrell Steinberg gave his final state of the city, and he described Sacramento as center left. And I was like, I'll take it. I will take it. You have reframed. I was like, we were able to prove with a citywide election what had only been theory for a long time, which is that there's a lot of people out there who want some change, who want to see something different, and who want to be a part of it, who want to be invited in. My campaign for mayor had 97 house parties over 18 months. People opening up their home, providing their own food, and saying, let's talk about what's happening in our community. And I heard great ideas, not just great questions of me, but people saying, here's what we could do, and here's how I'd like to help. And so that movement has not died. We have continued on with More is Possible, bringing people together all year after the campaign was over, when I wasn't sure if I was going to run, but I was just like, we built something. People came to me after the election and said, when are we getting together again? And I said, well, the campaign is over. They said, yeah, we know, but we built something here. What are we doing next, right? And so we met up at the Unitarian Church. And, we got to say thank you to everybody for all that they did and start talking about what we wanted to see and really begin to think about how we move. And so many things have grown out of that. And so that's what we're doing here in Sacramento. That's what this race is about. It's a continuation. It's a harvesting of seeds that were planted starting in 2023, that we have to continue to do this work, because Sacramento has all the makings of being a national leader in what we can do. We don't have to sit and look at New York and say, oh my gosh, they're working on childcare and they're working on freezing the rents and they're working on all of these things. We can have that here. And so I think last year, if I just had a closing note, the last year, I think, should teach us something. And I know many people in Sacramento in particular, and of course across the country, are not, inclined to give a lot of credit to Donald Trump for much. But I will give credit for this. He has revealed the lie that we have been told our entire lives, which is that change is slow, progress has to take forever, you have to build a full consensus of everybody before you do anything. We have seen an administration over the last 12 months that has been bold and brazen and has moved quickly and has done things. And my only wish is that we had that same boldness and brazenness and desire to be able to make sure that childcare was affordable and that housing was affordable and that we had clean air and clean water and that we weren't approving projects to deforest our region and that we were bringing our communities together and saying, how do we help the people who can't live alone to be able to be fully supported so that they can be indoors? These are the questions that I want us to answer, and I want the same boldness, the energy, but I want it to be directed in a way that is loving, that is caring, that is kind, and that is ultimately productive. And so that's what this campaign is about, and that's the inspiration I hope people have to get involved and to join us.
Thank you, Flo. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
This has been Robert Hanson with Flojaune Cofer, who announced her candidacy for Board of Supervisors District 1, and the election is in June.